In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Hey folks, we are thrilled to announce a very special giveaway to kick off 2025 with purpose and power. It's already episode 10. Thank you so much for all your support this far. We're giving away free access to our leading course, Cracking the Sales Code from the Learning Code Institute. It's an incredible program valued at $324 value and truly designed to empower you to excel in not only in sales, but achieve your goals in 2025 in a meaningful fashion. How to enter? Nothing as easy. You simply share this episode on your favorite social media platform and leave us a review on any podcast platform you're listening to. That's it. The winner will be announced on social media on Wednesday, January 1st, 2025. A perfect way to start the new year. So don't miss out on the chance to set yourself up for success. Share, review, and good luck. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcasts. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into the power of concise and heartfelt communications, the art of authentic leadership, and a transformative impact of intentionality in both personal and professional interactions. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Gerharz, a communication expert with a PhD in computer science. Michael has dedicated his career to teaching leaders and organizations how to express complex ideas in simple, impactful ways. As the host of the Irresistible Communication and the author of The Path to Strategic Impact, he empowers individuals to find clarity in their messagings and inspire meaningful changes. His insight on heartfelt communication and authenticity has resonated globally, making him a sought-after voice in the art of leadership. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Dr. Michael Gerharz, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Looking forward to that conversation. Hey, Sam, good to see you.
Absolutely. Well, it's the first time meeting you, so I'm very, very excited to dive into some of the most interesting things you've been working on. But to start us off, I've been seeing this fantastic tagline, which I think resonates very well with your work, which is the art of communications. Tell us more about that.
Well, actually, very early on in my career, when I was still, on a very different career path as a computer scientist, that's where my PhD is in, I learned early on that the words that you use to communicate your ideas have at least as much impact as the ideas itself. I've seen so many ideas die because people just didn't care about finding the words that got other people interested in those ideas, that made it easy for other people to understand it, to make the complex feel simple at least, so that there was curiosity to engage in conversations. And so the difference that I saw with the ideas that changed the world compared to those that just faded into the background was often not the brilliance of the idea itself, but the words that the way that they were communicated. And that's how I got interested in the art of communicating. And what I saw was that it's both certain, of course, in a way. There's a lot of kind of theory, methods, and tools, and like skill and craft to it, but it's also kind of an art in the way that, you can get a long way by just appreciating the beauty of words, the beauty of clarity, and, finding words that just, not only sound smart, but, really feel good, make you feel excited about the things that you communicate.
Interesting. How much You bring up a very interesting point. You said that the feeling of how these words perhaps alleviates the conversation in your soul. How important do you think the feeling of words is in the grand scheme of things?
I mean, actually, it boils, I think, down to something that everyone has heard in their lives so often that it feels like, well, that boring cliche like that. If you don't burn for your passion, how can anyone else burn for it, right? And I think that starts with the words that you use to speak about about your idea. When those words don't make you feel excited, how would you expect that they make anyone else feel excited? And then but on the other hand, if they make you feel excited, well, then the whole way that you show up changes, right? That you can basically skip all those body language YouTube tutorials that you've been watching your whole life in order to find that confidence. Because when you use words that you truly believe in about the things that you're deeply passionate about, then, well, there's no way that you're not going to be excited about this, right? And your body will basically want to do the right things. And so you only have to, well, let it do its thing, amplify that a little bit, but not really kind of put anything superficial on top of that. And that's, I think, an angle that's often overlooked, right? That the passion that you bring shines through the words that you use.
Right. Something that I love in ways to quantify leadership is how much you have the ability to communicate your vision in such ways that others join you in it. When you're thinking about communications and leaderships, I saw basically this on top of your website is better word mean better business. When you truly think about it, like you said, any idea is just as good as the words attached to it. What would you say is a few things, a few tips that could help basically leaders better communicate their vision overall?
I think that there's a very profound shift that we're seeing at the moment, and that has a lot to do with how leadership communicates today. I mean, when I think about like my father's, or perhaps probably more my grandfather's time, it was the command and control model, right? Where the leader could basically just throw a command at their team and have them figure out what it actually means, and then kind of put it into action. We've come a long way since then. We've tried the carrot and the sticks in between, but today we have kind of that leading the way model, right? Where the leader is expected to have all the right answers, and going first, eating last, and so. But basically, when anything's unclear, you can go to the leader and ask them. So what do I do, right? And the leader is expected to have the answers. I don't think that that's the most effective model still. That because the best leaders that I see and many of my clients have switched to a different approach. That they kind of understand leadership not as being the one who's got the answers, but as the one who's willing to figure out the answers. And so it's not so much about, telling you what's right, but much more about lighting the path. So this is where we're headed. This is why we're headed there. But I trust you, team, to be able and willing to figure out how to best get there. I trust you to have better answers than I have. Most of all, I trust the team to have better answers together than anyone on the team could have on their own. And so that switching, that transformation to lighting the path as opposed to leading the way is, I think, a very profound thing that you should strive for.
It is, and we see this happen at all perhaps prolific organization. This understanding that leadership is way more of a collective understanding than an individual one. That being said, obviously, as your organization grow and you have more and more people that needs to embrace these visions, they always comes back to this incredible quote by Newton, which is, "I can calculate the motion of every bodies, but not the madness of people." When you're thinking about how different in the ways they learn, but in the way they act also, how complex can sharing a vision effectively truly can be in a modern age?
Well, that is a brilliant question, because I think in a way um, it might even trick us into overthinking that. Um, because, well, in the end, I think there are good arguments to make the case that it shouldn't be complex at all. That if the vision is complex, then it might not be the vision that you get many people rally around, right? That the simpler it is, and the simpler words you find to express that idea, the better your chances will be to actually realizing the vision.
Interesting. When you're thinking about, and I love, I will dive deeper into it right away. I was able to take a very quick but effective peek at the path to strategic impact, which is your latest book, and truly, I love to go basically from a letter to the other, because obviously Pat is not only a clever, obviously, understanding of basically what Ken comes forward, but also it's an acronym. And P is for plain and simple, A is for actionable, T is for transformative, and then H is for heartfelt. And I think that the three first letter actually makes sense, and we hear it quite often. But I really love basically how you incorporate heartfelt in this four letter acronym. Why was it so important? Tell me about the relationship and the importance of heartfelt in communication.
This is perhaps the most overlooked thing in business of all the things that you can overlook, right? Because but at the same time, it's the thing that makes all the difference. Just think about yourself and compare the way that you approach a task that someone has told you makes perfect sense to do, something that's just on your to-do list. You know it's part of the plan, it just has to be done. And then compare that with how you approach a second task where you wholeheartedly and passionately believe in, where you think, well, this is something that I put all my heart in. And just, well, compare the joy that you put into your work, but also the rigor and dedication that you put into making it the best possible result, right? And now let's just multiply that with like the 50,000 employees that you have in your company, and imagine all of them would approach their work with that passion and dedication, and the difference that that could make. And most importantly, the difference that that will make when times get rough, right? I mean, the business is easy when the wind is blowing in your way, right? When you're just, well, the sales are there, the customer love is there, the economy is doing great. But yeah, what happens when COVID hits, or what happens when there's a war in our neighboring country, or what happens just if the economy gets a hit and turns down, and suddenly that smart strategy that we thought up last year just well doesn't seem to work anymore. But well, the choices still need to be made, and we still need to make those calls and take those actions. That's what heartfelt does for you, right? When you believe in the work that you do, well, it will take you through those rough times. It will help you see why those tough calls are actually necessary, and why we need to go through that valley of blood, sweat, and tears in order to get to the other side, where, well, we'll certainly see the next summit, but well, to get there, we'll have to go through that valley. That's what heartfelt does for you.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. And to me, heartfelt is in many ways a multiplier, because if your heartfelt message is also the heartfelt message of 50,000 employees, think about not only the clarity, but also the impact that emerge off of that. One concept that is always refer as one of the most important things I like to get your thoughts on it is authenticity. When you're thinking about communications, heartfelt obviously being very important, clarity being very important, but how important it truly is, especially in this world where novel ideas are shared on a daily basis, even quicker than that, on an hourly basis. How big of a deal authenticity is?
Um, First of all, I think authenticity is perhaps one of the most misunderstood concepts that there is in communication, because there are a couple of angles to that. But and there are actually two different ways that we use authenticity, and they are sometimes confused. Well, the first is when we speak about ourselves and think that our actions kind of are in line with our values. That's what we mean with authenticity. But then there is the other meaning of authenticity, because, well, what the actual purpose of actually even thinking about authenticity is that it's in relation to the people that we're talking to, right? The team, our audience, the customer. And the real question here is, how authentic will they perceive us? And the thing to appreciate here is that kind of authenticity is always in the eye of the beholder, right? No matter how well aligned we think our actions are with our values, that doesn't really count, because it's always going to be the team who decides whether they perceive leadership as authentic or not. So whether they perceive that what they say is aligned with what they mean, and vice versa. And so that's what it boils down to, right? To say what you mean and mean what you say. The words that you use and the way that you show up and the way that you bring across those words, they play a very huge role in how this is perceived. But it's not that idea of, well, I'm not going to prepare much because then I'm not authentic, because I just, well, when I wing it, I'm much more authentic. That's not what your audience will perceive as authentic. In fact, they might even get a little bit anxious about this, because they see that you struggle to find the words, that you kind of use and uhs and well, really not that concise language. And that's not what they want to see as an authentic leader. They want to see that what you say is what you mean, and what you mean is what you say, and doing that in the most aligned way possible. And when you manage that, and actually, well, at times ask them, what did you get from that? What do you think we're actually up to? Do you think that those two things align? That's what really counts. And when you do that, well, they will so much more believe in what you say, so much be so much more aligned behind you and have your back, because they know, well, what that guy says, he means that. This is really what he stands for. And so, yeah, I believe in that, and I'm going to root for that.
So the way to calculate your authenticity is not how much authentic you think you are, but how much the people around you you're trying to serve ought to believe that you are, right?
Yeah. You can be true to yourself, right? That is something that you can influence. But whether other people perceive that as authentic, that's up to them. And it depends on a lot of parameters, like how they were raised, right? The media that they consume, their friends, and that's not as easy to understand. And it's actually a tricky beast to really work out, right? Because it's much more nuanced than you would think. It's certainly not something that you'd learn by just watching a couple of YouTube tutorials.
Sure. And in talking about concisiveness, one thing that I admire about the greatest communicators are the abilities in which they can take grandiose and very complex ideas or topics and boil it down in such ways that is easy for everybody to understand. And I think that on your podcast, actually, Irresistible Communication, you do such a great job at that, right? It's a simple, plain and simple 2 minutes on a singular idea. And I think that's very much what the world needs in terms of effectiveness. When you think of your work, but also the meaning of what concise communication is, do you believe the world ought to go in that direction of a concisiveness and plain and simple understanding of what truly matters?
Wholeheartedly, actually. So, I mean, what's the point of communication, right? The point is to help my audience see something that they haven't seen quite that way before. Um, and so my goal is not to appear as professional as possible or as eloquent as possible or as intelligent as possible. The measure of great communication is how well you do at, well, helping your audience see that thing. And the way to do that is usually not by using that grandiose language that you mentioned earlier, right? But to use the plain and simple language. So I'm not impressed by someone who knows how to express like simple ideas with the most complex statements using all that tech jargon and those fancy words from the dictionary. I'm much more impressed and by those people who manage to express complex ideas using simple words. Because let's be honest with ourselves, right? When we are sitting on the other side in the audience, that's what makes us feel smart, right? When that guy on the stage, they find those simple words and help us see something that we kind of had an intuitive understanding, but now, it's that fundamental truth that they just dropped using the simplest example that there is. That's what makes us feel smart and kind of rise ahead above, right? And so I think that's how you change people's minds, not by having them admire you for your brilliant language, but having them admire themselves for being able to understand those concepts.
That's a very interesting angle. It's one of the few times that I hear it put it this way. Your audience obviously feels smarter when they understand your language. They feel also more part of whatever you're trying to convey when they can see themselves as part of the conversation by understanding the words. It's very interesting to me because we see this very often with presentation. Right. Obviously, many presentations are quite shallow, and what I see as somebody that is also leading a team is most of the time, and it depends on your brand positioning and what you're trying to convey in your service and product. There's a few variables, but most of the time, obviously, valuing substance and prioritizing clear deliverables, clear language across the board is not only more effective, but definitely more meaningful than fancy overall. Do you, when you take a look at the business landscape as we're currently evolving within it, do you think that's a direction that the business world is going, or how do you position yourself towards basically how most current powerful leaders are communicating?
I think what we're seeing currently is the power of the employees, right? That employees increasingly have a choice. In part fueled by the remote work revolution. That we're not restricted to the neighborhood company and whoever runs it and however they run it. It's basically the only employment that we can get. But we can basically work across the globe. For any leader, that's the point, resonates most with us. And so what we're seeing is that more and more leaders understand that the way that they show up and the way that they communicate actually gives employees something to resonate with, something to rally behind, and something to identify with. And so what those leaders have understood is that it's not the team's job to figure my ideas out, right? It's my job. The easier I make it for them to get what I mean, to help them see the vision and to help them not only see the path, but understand how we make choices to travel that path. So the easier I make that for them, the more dedication they will show towards their work and the more attractive that position will become.
Interesting. A very important concepts and portion of communication reside in the human aspect, right? It's human talking to another human, trying to be heartfelt, obviously, and trying to be meaningful in all its ways. When you're thinking about remote work and now the fact that we're communicating just like this podcast, thousands of miles away, how can a conversation thousands of miles away be as meaningful and as impactful as one in which we sit down and shake hands and look each other in the eyes and so on? How important is that? Does that change communication at all?
Well, it certainly does, but it doesn't have to, right? Um, so we still have a shot at making a connection. We can, well, first of all, mean what we say and say what we mean. We can be fully present in the moment. We can try to pay attention to the nuances and subtleties of your body language, even on a screen. And we can ask questions and we can listen closely. And when we do all of that, we can build real connections. And then, in fact, I've built many very close and dear relationships over the past 4 years since the pandemic started, and with people I've never met in my life, but who I wholeheartedly call friends now. But we can also, look at that meeting as, well, the competition to that Netflix show that's running at the same that we could watch instead, or that YouTube stream that we that was recommended to us on social media, or we can just pick up our phones and chat with our friends while the other guy is explaining their thoughts or running us through the presentation. We can all do of that, and so basically that's a choice, right? If we choose to be present in the moment and that to make the best use of our time together, then, well, we have the same opportunity of making strong connections and making the difference than if we would sit in the same room. But we can also choose to not do that, and to just waste each other's times. But actually, if you're totally honest, much the same way as we would in a meeting room. Well, I recall actually meetings where, well, there were 10 people there, and the only one paying attention was the one doing the presentation, and everyone else was sitting behind their laptops, right? So that's not really a complete change of how the world is run. But, well, I think it's still true that it's a choice.
Right. So impactful communication obviously doesn't have to be in person, in the physical and intangible world. I think we're seeing this more and more. I think most people would agree with you that an impactful communication actually doesn't have to need to have any singular place. And how beautiful is it actually that we can have now communication with grandiose and actually incredible minds in a simple couple of clicks on a beautiful 15, 17-inch computer. I think there's novelty in this idea in which we can all share what we believe in a very free and just a very extensive manner. I think it's George Bernard, if I'm not mistaken, the Nobel winning novelist and playwright, most importantly, which has the single biggest problem in communications is the illusion that it has taken place. And I think that's a little bit of what you're saying, which is that the place matter way less than the meaning of your words to mean what you say, and the firm intention of trying to create something of value in any shape or form. When you're thinking about intentionality, how is that important? How important is that in communications? The sole intentions of and prior to even having any words coming out of your mouth, the intentionality behind being an effective communicator, being a leader of hope and positive manner. How important is that perhaps compared to somebody without the prior thinking, without before they speak?
I think that the quote that you just gave is a brilliant example, right? That and it's a great motivator to actually take ownership of that communication takes place and works out the way that we hope for, to not delegate that task to the other side, right? Because let's face it, a lot of communicators approach communication in like more the sender's mode, right? That they throw a bunch of information at you, and hoping that something sticks. And well, if it doesn't, they're almost upset because, well, they've mentioned it on slide 10, right? But I think that a much more valuable approach to communication is to turn that radically around and look at what I would call the rule number one in communication. That is, if they didn't get it, they didn't get it, and just take ownership of that. No matter that you meant it slightly differently, no matter how hard you tried, they didn't get it, and just try to understand what was going on. So why didn't they understand it? Rather than getting mad at them or getting frustrated about the thing that it didn't work out as you hoped it would. Just figure out better ways to communicate. Or why not turn it around and just ask a question? So what did you understand? So what's the issue here? What's going on here? And just, try to understand the other side a little bit better. And once you start doing that, you're much better positioned to find better words.
Yes. Tolerance is indeed quite a virtue. There's wisdom in tolerance, no doubt. When you're thinking about the emergence of opinions, we now live in a world where there's never been as many people with a voice, an impactful voice, as before, through social media and other medium that we now take care and perhaps value. How can we assure as great leaders that the way that we communicate is in such ways in which either people agree with you or those that don't agree with you can not only be tolerated but also perhaps accepted and embraced, and perhaps when you're thinking about how the perspective on the singular opinions, do you think we live in a world now where speech and diversity of opinions is as valued as ever, and is that a great thing, you think?
I'm not sure whether we can lift that into a general statement about our times, because certainly many people feel differently. That it isn't as easy to just speak about what you believe and how you look at the world. But at least in your circle of influence, like in your team, when you're the leader of a team, you can influence that, right? You can change that. You can set the standard for that. In this team, we're doing it a little bit differently. We value every voice. The junior's voice is just as important as my own voice as the CEO. And the project manager is just as valuable as the developer. And so you can set that standard. And of course, it starts by giving the example with yourself, by really being open to feedback and being accessible for opposing voices, right? So when someone kind of doesn't understand the direction that you're putting the company in, have them ask you and give them permission to ask you. So I don't get it. So why do we turn around that way? And if someone sees a better way, have them voice that opinion and let them sketch out their idea. That might not be possible in every single meeting because we just run out of time. But create the space where there's at least an opportunity for those with differing views to raise that voice, and never shut them down, right? And when you lead by that example, you open up the floor for the team to do it among themselves, to asking that question. So what do you mean by that? Why do you think that makes sense, or why do you don't think that makes sense? To asking those asking those questions the norm rather than the exception.
Leading by example It's such a crucial concept, not just in communication, but I think in all areas of life. We talk about just how important communication is in business, but when you're thinking about your personal life and everything surrounding perhaps the business life, communication is truly the essence of everything we're doing. It's will impact the relationship with your wife, your relationship with your parents, your children's. It's such a, and that's the beauty in it, is that, and that's what I want to ask you, is when you're thinking about, if you want to be anyone in this world, a valuable force for good, the one of the very few things that you should focus on is definitely communications, because think about the ROI on it. Use words every single sentence, every single conversation at any singular moment. It's something that will always stay with you. And when you're thinking about the levels of communications for you personally as an individual, as Michael, is it, when you, if you think about just how important it is to not only train it but to excel at it, would you say that communication nowadays is one of the thing that one of the skill sets that is not only worth pursuing but worth mastering in any ways?
I mean, yeah. First of all, it's my job, right? So it's what I deeply believe in, and what I help others do. So yeah, of course. I'm not sure whether that was that there ever was a time where that's been different. Like, I mean, actually, the groundwork for what we today know as rhetoric has been laid by Cicero, so like more than 2,000 years ago, and even then, well, the Romans understood that, well, rhetoric skills will greatly improve the chances of, well, getting the Senate to approve you, or to root for you. And so it's always been that way, right? That if you find words that resonate strongly with the people that you're trying to influence, then you will have a much better chance of actually making the impact. And I think what's changed, though, compared to like 2,000 years ago, that this is more accessible than ever. We have the books, we have the YouTube tutorials, we have the influencers, we have the blogs, and we have the coaches that help you actually learn those skills. So if you agree with me and you think that, yeah, totally, communication is something that will open up so many doors for me, then today you've got all the tools that you need, from free of charge, like hopping on at the on YouTube and watching a couple of videos, to, well, just, well, hiring that coach that will kind of leap you ahead, because they've done the reading for you and just will help you find the words and pull them out of you, rather than you having to figure it out on yourself. So whatever it is, if you decide that this is something I want to learn, there's never been a better time to learn it and actually make that happen.
Great. When you're thinking about the opinion that actually the influx of information is too much, and actually what we're seeing is, even if our access to better ways to communicate, younger generation seems to be communicating as sporty as ever. Again, that's what some people hold as an opinion. Do you agree, disagree with it?
You mean that there's too much information today, or
The position in which we see in younger generation basically an overwhelming amount of information, and therefore it actually pushes down the level of their communication instead of bringing it up?
I've never been a big fan of undervaluing the skills of young people. I mean, I've been one of them myself at some point in my life, and I always thought, well, yeah, I'm quite smart, right? So that's what I thought when I was kind of a teenager and growing up, or at the university. And I've never really changed that perspective. I think that my children, my oldest daughter's just graduated to college, and that she's pretty smart, and that she's got a very different way of dealing with information and communicating than I have. But at the same time, I also sometimes think that, well, she's got a better way to express that thought than I would have found. So the way that youth is communicating is very different than, well, what our parents and grandparents used, but it's perhaps not gotten very much worse. We just have that tendency to stick to the habits that we have. But well, yeah, it's just a fact that today's youth prefers to learn with videos, which sometimes, well, gives me a headache, because I've been raised with books, and I give me a choice between reading a book and watching a YouTube. I'm always going to pick the book. But my son is squarely the opposite, right? Give him the choice, and he will always pick the YouTube video, and neither one is better than the other, or worse than the other. It's just a different way of framing the same information. And I think that's just how time flows. That those things change, and today's way of communicating is just adapted to our generation.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think that one thing that is very clear is that we're obviously a result of our environment, and nowadays with the influx of information, but in a way to consume the information. Most importantly, again, videos that are accessible. That's only a few decades old, even if that. It's very, very new. So obviously, it is shaping the way people are learning, and therefore gaining momentum, perhaps in younger generation, which they're more techy. It's more their time, as you said. I think correctly. What I was referring to, though, is through social media and in other medium in which we basically communicate in abbreviation, for example, or where the grammar is not as important as in a book, for example, where it's always proofread, there's always editor. Don't you think that to a certain level, there's still something to be cautious about in the way that we always communicate, to make sure that we are elevating our societies, again, not only wisdom and quantity of words, but also quality of those in which they decide to speak with.
So what's good quality communication then for you?
Quality in communication, I believe, is not in the world, is not in how you speak, but if you are understood. I think that's the way I will qualify communication. I can cite you a poem, but obviously, if you don't understand it, perhaps I was very poor in my communication, in my opinion.
Exactly. Right. That's exactly how I look at it. So it's so does it make a difference? Did you get through? Did they get you? And if you manage that with an abbreviation, fine. If you manage it with an emoji, fine. If you manage it with a meme, perfect. But if you manage it with kind of an elaborate text that takes 1,000 words, because it's a really elaborate thought and goes deep below the surface, that's fine as well. And I fully trust the new generation with being able to discern both, to be able to use the meme when it's the appropriate way to make the point, but also to be able to figure out how to write a proper essay when that's the way to make the point.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's actually I think what you just said is such a valuable concept, because even for myself, I am obviously a younger gentleman. I'm actually 20 years old, but what I see is that you're definitely correct in the essence of if concise is elaborate enough so that the other person understand, that's totally fine. Though I see definitely a gap between generation where there's many time where, for example, I will talk with somebody my age and somebody in the background that is from another generation have a hard time to follow the conversation and to actually understand what is going on. Does that occur with your children sometimes? They use different words, different types of expression, and so on.
Totally, and we will make a lot of fun of each other about the way that my kids speak, but they will make just as much fun about the way that my wife and I speak with each other, right? So yeah, it's but the same happened with my parents, right? When I was growing up, they made fun of the way that we expressed certain thoughts, and likewise we were rolling our eyes with their like old way of expressing the same thought. it's certainly helpful if you're able to kind of switch the mode and be open to the to well, how not only other generations but also other circles, because that's not only a generational thing, right? That's even among the same generation, that there's, well, different kinds of circles, who have their own way of talking to each other, and just being open to that, and to a certain degree even being able to use their language will open up many doors for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I think that it's very funny actually. There's humor, but there's also a fair bit of loveliness in this understanding that I think one of the main concept that I love diving deeper in is with new idea comes obviously new words and how to express it, and therefore that will obviously influence our speech and the way that we elaborate our ideas. I remember a few times, sitting down at the Christmas table and think in just basically somebody from my family say something, an opinion that is old school as we think it is, since we're a younger generation, and just rolling my eyes and saying, hey, that will never pass in in basically the schoolyard, for example. You can't say that anymore. When you're thinking about the evolution of thoughts, do you believe in many ways that it's not about what's true or false, but what's most relevant to our present time, so that we can have a singular outcome, which is greater meaning for all?
That's actually my favorite topic. So glad you touched it. Whenever I get a chance, I get to remind people. I like to remind people that it's never about trying to be right, but always about getting it right. Right. So that, well, yeah. Just be open to understanding the other side, and just be open to the thought that the way that we did it yesterday, or the words that we used yesterday, might not be the best way to do it today or express our thoughts today. And tomorrow it might be even a different story yet again, right? And and well, we waste so much time in defending like those thoughts and the way that we think about a certain topic, and trying. So we waste so much time in trying to be right in those struggles and fights, when the world couldn't care less about who's right in that moment, because it's just going to move on, and trying to figure out what's the way ahead, and how can we get it right for today and tomorrow. That's a much more valuable approach.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And this endless pursuit of truth, and I find this in many intellectual, which I very much admire, but typically I sense some type of again intolerance for the other point of view, which typically resolve in catastrophe. See pretty much any modern wars. Obviously, we will as we're seeing the world now unfolding. We're seeing that wars. Obviously, it's always been a problem, and perhaps there is no sign that it won't be a problem. Basically, moving forward, if we do not change our understanding of how to not only communicate with each other, but also to let go and let God. I think the understanding in which my freedom obviously stop where yours begin, and in the understanding in which the world is a much better place if everybody can be brought, every moral beings obviously are brought forwards in this understanding that their opinions are valued and their point of view are valued, and therefore we will make sure that they are accommodated, at least to the point where they find meaning in this life, and a chance to pursue happiness, for example, which I'm a big believer in. When you're thinking about your PhD in computer science, and in the way you went from understanding computers to now trying to master how people communicate and how people simply operate, do you see any perhaps overlap between these two concepts?
I mean, first of all, we're living in those phenomenal times where we now see machines starting to sound like humans, right? And where, well, we have, I mean, it's even called Chat GPT. We chat with computers in a way that it almost feels like we're having a conversation with a real person, right? Um, so there's certainly an overlap, um, and actually that's that's something that crosses my mind and that I start to observe more and more, is that the better those machines become at, well, acting as a human in a conversation, the less tolerant I become with humans that act like a machine, right? Like those customer service representatives on a service hotline that just run through a script, have no permission whatsoever to make any kind of choice, and just, well, repeat the same sentence over and over again. And that is just something that is a waste of human talent, and that is just so frustrating for someone sitting on the other side, when there's actually creativity sitting in the on the other side, but you just don't let them be creative. You don't trust them with making good choices and decisions. So if that's the job, well, just replace it with a machine and let those humans do what humans can do best. Be creative and empathize and do meaningful work, right?
The more machines act like human, the more humans act like machine. It's my first time hearing just phrase it this way. Tell me more about that relationship. I think there's some golden nuggets there. Can you extend your thoughts?
Well, actually, I've had that experience just last week when we ordered something from a store, and something just went wrong, and we ended up in a service hotline trying to figure this out and work this out, how what we ordered can well actually be delivered to our home. Um, but that was about the most frustrating experience I recall in a long time, because, well, that person on the other side was just incapable, or perhaps not incapable. It was they she wasn't allowed to deviate in any way, and so the only thing that she did was to just repeat the sentence over and over again, knowing full well that this doesn't solve our problem, that it doesn't solve the company's problem, and that, well, it's just, well, delegating solution to time and hope, right? And that's just a very, very frustrating experience. Um, but what a difference that is to, well, if you think about, so for example, Nordstrom, right? That chain store in the United States, who are famous to use that mantra of always use good judgment, right? Where there was a customer coming into one of their stores, which was built at a location where a tire store used to be, trying to return tires. And the salesperson just gladly did it because, well, they saw that there's a confusion. It's not the customer's, well, in a way you could argue that it's the customer's fault, but, well, it doesn't make anyone's life better if I just insist that you're at the wrong place. Why not make that customer happy right now and turn them into something who's just delighted by the amount of friendliness and empathy that's happening at that place, so that they might just think, well, why not come back to that location, because that's been a very phenomenal employee. And so that's making really good use of the human potential, something that computers aren't good at least not yet. That they can perhaps give you those ideas, but they have not they don't have the judgment to actually act in that way. That I see you, I hear you, and I'm sorry for the confusion. I'm just going to do something about that. That capacity is something that separates humans from computers, at least for now.
Wow. I never heard about that story, by the way. It's my first time. That Nordstrom story is actually quite wholesome. Um, when you're thinking about the novelty of human communications, and you were just talking about it's in at length, which I think was quite beautiful. The empathy and the heartfelt of that a human can only perceive but also implement in any communication is something that obviously computers are nowhere near to be able to do as we speak. Though they're getting better and better at imitating, excuse me. By the day, it seems like it's evolving so quickly. It's pretty magical. Are you? What's your position on AI evolving at this speed? Is it a good thing for human communication? Is it a bad thing? Where does your opinion relies?
To me, it very much feels like it's leveling the playground. Um, because, well, when you think like a couple of years back, or even some decades back, it used to be that you needed to have basically a whole department of secretaries to kind of do the writing for you and assemble that report, or do the research for you. Um, that has changed a lot since we have computers, but it's changing yet again since we have AI. Because, well, I don't necessarily need that army of assistants anymore. I can ask my AI assistant to do some research for me, and then perhaps have one assistant to double check it, right? I can ask an AI assistant to come up with the draft of a report and then edit it down to match my style. Basically, the blank sheet of paper moment has been removed, so there's no blank sheet of paper, no writer's block anymore. I can just ask AI to come up with the first draft and work from there, let my gut guide me. So that is something that I feel a truly hopeful thought, right? That it will allow even more like individuals like myself do stuff that used to take like a department of 100 people to build just 30 or 40 years ago. That is something that will just skyrocket creativity. Um, that is one thing. And the other thing is that I see two very different ways of how AI is being used today. The overwhelming majority is, let's call it type A, where people use it to just save them time, to just write that social media post quicker, to just shoot out that reply for your email by just letting AI write it. That is one way. But I also see type B, which is way, way less common, which is not to save time, but to improve the results, to make better research, to come up with better ideas, to look for a more concise way of expressing the same thought, to look for better metaphors, to use their language. So basically to spend the same time that you used to spend, but, well, in a more effective, efficient way, to come up with better ideas in the same amount of time. And when we do that, well, again, creativity and the creativity that we will see as a result will set you miles apart from type A.
Yes, yes. We very much need to master as human being the understanding that technology needs to better our experience, better our output, and not the other way around. Perhaps we're not building better AI because of AI. We're building better AI to be more accommodating and better for human beings to use. And I love what she said about leveling up the playing field, because that reminded me of a quote, by the way, by Robert Frost, which is half the world is composed of people who have something to say but can't say it, and the other half who has nothing to say but keep on saying it. When you're thinking about leveling up the playing field and how important it is to actually to lower the barriers to entry, that people can actually get in a mindset in which, hey, I can do this and perhaps produce incredible work, which we saw very few of, obviously, in human history, since it's actually very complicated as a master communicator yourself. I'm sure you know this, but it's actually very complicated to communicate at the highest level. That's why there's novelty in it. There's level, perhaps, to communications. When you're thinking about this this lower barrier to entry and the fact that it will no doubt obviously increase the productivity of work and perhaps creative output. I will ask you a harder question, though, morally, with your opinion and your opinion only. If you had to assign a moral value, as in, is it good or bad for the world to have basically AI play such a big role in the way they shape our communications, the word that we use, the perhaps the understanding in which ideas now and concepts are completely created by a separate entity, the AI, and not human beings. Is that in the long run? Do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
I'm really not sure whether that's a question that will ever bother me, um, because the question of whether something is good or bad makes a lot of sense when there is a choice, right? So when you can decide to, well, say that sentence or use a more kind version of saying the same thing, to make that purchase or not, to fly the plane or just stay home and work remotely. That these are choices, but we don't get a choice of whether AI will improve or not, of whether there will be yet a better version of OpenAI next year or not. There will. There's just no choice involved here. So the question that I'm asking myself is, so given that it's there and that it's going to happen and that it's not going away, no matter how much we would wish for it, the relevant question to me is, so what do we do with it? How can we make the best use of it? How can we use it to improve humanity and to improve the lives of as many people as possible? Because let's face it, it's not going to go away. It's here to stay, and it's going to improve. We can just as well do something with it.
Beautiful, and you seem like an internal optimist. I love it. I love it. I think it's a beautiful strength, and it's actually take courage to be optimist, and because we can definitely see how things can go wrong. But I agree with you. I think that the good will far outweighs use wise the bad in concerning basically AI. One thing that I always fantasize about, and I'd love to finish our conversation with this, is I can see a world, I can envision a world where all the hard labor, all the dangerous jobs, all everything that basically human beings do because we must do it and not because we want to do it, are completely offset basically by AI and robots and diverse entities that we may not even know the full extent of as we speak. For human beings to do what's the most creative, what's meaningful to them in such ways that all humanity can be empowered, all individuals in humanity can be empowered through their own understanding of their calling and not just a doing what the world expects of them or must do because of diverse constraints. Let's fantasize a little bit together. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that we perhaps will see the day where human beings can be in such a beautiful position where they completely entirely do what they wish to be doing work wise?
That requires another thing to be true, right? I mean, the technology is one thing, but well, to be able to do what you want requires that you know what you want, right? Which is a surprisingly difficult to grasp concept, right? Just try to, well, on the spot express, so what is it that I truly want? So just imagine that, well, I could do whatever I want, and so what is it that I truly want to do now? So other than like surfing through Instagram, right? Or flicking through Netflix. So what is it that I truly want? And well, incidentally, that's another area where communication is a really powerful friend, right? Because just trying to express that and finding words to really express, so what is it that I want, will probably get you closer to that and understanding that. And then, kind of much like kind of crafting the vision for your personal life, right? So what is it, who, or perhaps even more precisely, who is it that I want to become? Like, if I have just the time, and what do I need to do to become that person? And just given the opportunity, would I really do it, and would I really have the guts to just go for that? And assuming that I don't have to do like the tiring work. And then if we get to that, we might just as well very quickly discover that it's perhaps not so much like the heavy work that gives us a headache and that makes our life feel heavier than it should be, but it's much more like that gap between what we want and the what we need to do to get to that place. And that just having the freedom to like spend the whole day playing the guitar, because that's what you're truly passionate about, can feel just as tiring and heavy as that day on the field. Not saying that it's really the same thing, but it can feel that way because, we just want to get that lick out of our hands and it just won't come out. And then our friend comes along, just picks up the guitar and just, plays it as if it's just a kindergarten move, right? And so that makes us feel miserable in the moment, although there's no reason for that. And so that's probably a very hard question to answer and find a satisfying answer, let alone in like a couple of minutes. But it's a fascinating experiment for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that now, in my understanding of the world, the objective of being self-sufficient, so you can be as selfless as possible, is what my calling is, and what I ought to believe that a lot of people can benefit from. Michael Gerharz, it's been an absolutely incredibly insightful conversation. I so appreciate your time, and I would love if you can, to just have you share some of your closing thoughts on our conversation, or anything else you'd like to share with our audience.
Given that we've spoken so much about like society at large and where we're headed and how we can make a difference, a thought that has always served me well is that it might be time to step off the hero's pedestal and leave it to the other side, to your audience, to your team, to your customer. Because so often we show up trying to impress people, kind of turning the spotlight on ourselves, and trying to get them to cheer for us and clap us on the shoulder for how brilliant we are. So in other words, to show up as the hero of the show when they couldn't care less, because, let's face it, they already got a hero and it's themselves. Everyone's the hero of their own lives. And if we just, step off that hero's pedestal, leave it to them, help them become a better hero of their lives, we might just have increased our ability to change the world so much. And they will be so much more open to listen to us than if we force them to cheer for us. So that will be a step off the hero's pedestal.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.